And here we are. So welcome again. I'm very glad that all the learners of the EcoPrice training course that just started yesterday are here today. We have learners from Italy, Portugal, Lithuania, Serbia, Cyprus, and Greece. So welcome everybody. The webinar is going to be conducted in English. If you would like to use subtitles here in Zoom, you can use just the button to have the subtitles in your language, and hopefully this will help you. Okay, you are going to use automatic subtitles if you need them. So as mentioned before, this is the first webinar of the EcoPrice online course that started yesterday. Today we are going to discuss one of the topic of module 1 about the digital dimension that hopefully you have already started going through to the online course. The topic that we are going to discuss today is one of the topics of the module 1, which is the so-called FOSS, which is the free open source software. And today with us, we have Angel Mateja from Gen Europe, who is an expert, a person that has written several articles and blogs on this topic that hopefully will help all of you discovering this interesting dimension of sustainability, and that helpful will help you with your EcoPrice, with your sustainable enterprise. Okay, you will see that I just closed all your mics so that there are no different voices during the webinar. Okay, this is why your mic is off in this moment. If you have any questions, you can write them in the chat, or you can wait until the end of Angel's presentation, where we will have some minutes just for your questions. Okay, then that's all from my side. Angel, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Simona. Hello, everybody. And well, again, thank you for inviting me to this webinar. And wow, I'm actually really surprised, positively surprised to see so many people here that are interested in learning about a topic which has been really close to my heart for many years. And yeah, I hope you enjoy what I have to share. Maybe I will say just really briefly about myself. So I am Gen Europe's IT manager for the last 8 years. And one of the core values of Gen Europe has to do with sustainability and regeneration in all areas. And because we are a distributed network all across Europe, the digital aspect of how do we interact with each other is also very relevant. That's why having a regenerative, a sustainable digital culture also is part of our mission. So I will share a presentation with you for, I would say, the next around 40 minutes. And as Simona said, like if you have any questions, you can write in the chat. And if not, you can just let me know after the presentation, and I'll try to answer all of them to the best of my abilities. Okay, so I'll just share my screen. I hope you can see the presentation.
Yes, we can, Angel.
All right. Okay, so I've taken the liberty because it is true that, let's say, the topic at hand is FOSS, or like free open source software. But I've taken the liberty of expanding that window a little bit. And I hope that will be okay for all of you, because I think free open source software does not exist in a void, and there has to be some context to it. So I will not only talk about that, but I will try to weave it into what kind of digital culture do we want to live in, or why does it matter to use things such as free open source software. And let me go a little bit into some, let's say, background or the mainstream approach. And this is where I want to start. So I don't know how many of you has asked yourselves sometimes the question of how much data do we actually have online? And well, according to several studies from, well, this reputable source, Statista, maybe some of you know that, we created, captured, copied, and consumed up to almost 150 zettabytes of information. I had to look into what is a zettabyte myself, and just for you to understand, like the sheer craziness of this dimension, is that if every, like I hope gigabyte is a term that we're all familiar with. So if every gigabyte was a drop of water, 181 zettabytes would be the equivalent of filling it with this water 72 billion Olympic pools, which is, I mean, for me, it's very difficult to grasp. But this is the amount of data that we are currently generating, consuming, exchanging, storing, etc. And as you can see, from 2024 to 2025, we go from 149 to 181. And according to this progression, we are, well, this was also like something which was quite mind-blowing to me. 90% of all the world's data, everything that has ever existed, has been generated actually within the past 2 years. That's simply mind-blowing. And what it means also is that the volume of data that it's generated, that we actually are dealing with, is doubling approximately every 4 years, which is also very baffling. Obviously, this is for those of you who are, I mean, we will see several examples, but for those of you who are familiar with exponential growth, you will see that this is clearly an exponential progression. And why is this growing so much? Well, we will see it in more detail, but basically because of the rise of internet mobile devices, everybody has a smartphone nowadays, the Internet of Things, which I will explain a little bit more in detail, high resolution video streaming and cloud computing, which I will explain all these terms, no worries. And obviously the so-called AI, which is, oh, I think there is, I don't know if that's a question or, okay, maybe somebody who mistakenly opened their mic. The so-called AI, which is also known, like the more concrete term for it is generative artificial intelligence. So where is all this data and how this moves around? And we will see, like I'm taking a little detour, but I promise you that this is very relevant. So basically, mostly the whole internet relies on physical servers, like machines that are in different data centers all around the world. And these data centers are connected with lots and lots of miles of undersea cables, switches, routers, the whole backbone infrastructure. And it requires a lot of energy and actually water for cooling down all those systems. So this is an example that not many people actually know of, but this is a submarine cable map that you can check anytime you want here. And you can see like all of these is like high band fiber optic, very large cables that are making actually possible that, for example, we're having this webinar right now. I think that was probably also another question, so we'll continue. We were talking before about the Internet of Things. So the Internet of Things is that maybe some years ago, we needed a computer or maybe a phone to connect to the internet. But nowadays, everything, like the trend is more and more that everything is connected to the internet. And as an example, we can see like the evolution of, you're very familiar probably with the concept of 5G, which was, yeah, some years ago, like there was a lot of talks, no, on the mass media about the appearance of these 5G networks. So all of this is the different generations of mobile connection. So 1G was the analog mobile phone, which probably most of you have not even experienced. The second generation was the revolution of going into the digital area, where suddenly emails and SMS and other kind of really simple data was able to be also sent through mobile phones. On 3G was already allowing faster data connection, and it would allow smartphones actually to navigate. I'm not sure, Simona, if you can ensure that people do
Yeah,
not
sorry,
unmute
somebody
themselves.
just activated the mic. I'm going to solve the problem. Sorry for that.
It's all right. Okay, then 4G, which also came by the end of the 21st century, where suddenly also like mobile connections could stream video. Nowadays, most of the world has already deployed the 5G network, where suddenly we have not only devices such as smartphones or tablets connecting, but also all kinds of vehicles and homes and other devices, and even your fridge is connected to that. And it allows for like high resolution streaming, which accounts for actually a lot of the data that we consume. And of course, maybe not many of you know, but 6G is already under development, and this will allow even crazier things with higher speeds and even more data volume being exchanged. So conversations using real-time 3D images, remote treatment using robots, all the kind of things that nowadays are still not possible using cell phone connections. So the next thing that I want to mention is what is actually the cloud. Many people are always talking about everything is on the cloud. And here it's a very interesting progression as well. Again, we see the exponential growth of what is called cloud computing market, because the cloud is not just the place where you store your data, but it's also a place where you can have applications. You can have databases. You can have lots of things, like there's servers that are running things for you. So all the things that are not being executed, that are not happening locally, are things that are happening in the cloud. And that requires more and more, because every time more and more things are happening in the cloud, it requires more devices, more cables, more computational power. And you can see how the markets, this is in terms of dollars, but the market size obviously has a direct correlation with the amount of devices and data that is going through the cloud. I will go into more detail about what is actually the cloud, because I'm not yet answering that. But yeah, you get a good glimpse of what actually the cloud is. No, it's like all the things that are not happening locally in your machine. So what about AI? AI is also like a relatively recent topic. Sometimes I'm amazed that in 2022 we still didn't have generative AI, and I think nowadays probably almost everybody has, at least, if not regularly, used AI to solve some of their problems. So you can see also here an estimate of carbon emissions from the training of AI models. So there is a thing of using a model, but then there is another thing, and I want to go like really deep into AI, unless maybe there are some questions after this presentation. The thing that actually takes more energy and therefore more carbon emissions, it's the so-called training of a model. And you can see how very non-complex models were using very little carbon footprint, and how, again, it blows up exponentially with having better and better and more complex large language models. This is only 2024. I can already tell you 2025 is much higher. And of course, all of these must have some real footprint. Well, before going into this big graph here, I just want to like bring your attention to this one. I just said, what is the cloud? No, like people sometimes imagine like these fluffy, uh, beautiful things just happening in the sky. Well, sorry to disappoint you, but actually the cloud is just other people's computers. And this means that there is like these big data centers with lots and lots of machines where all this data is stored, all these things are processed. Everything that you stored in the cloud is actually stored in somebody's server. And who might that somebody be? Well, here you have already some glimpse of like the big players, and you can see who is actually using most amount of electricity. Google is the absolute winner. This is the equivalent of 2.3 million households a year. Same with Microsoft, Meta, Apple, Nvidia. This is how many megawatt hours per million US dollars. Everything is like, well, making reference to the US, but I think it's easy to extrapolate. Again, we're only not talking about electricity consumption, but also water consumption. And mostly the water is used in order to cool down these massive systems, like a lot of machines together calculating, computing, storing data, reading and writing, and all of that generates a lot of heat. So a lot of water is actually needed to cool down. You could argue that, okay, this means that actually you're heating up water. Of course, some of that water that dissipates. And obviously, even if like not all the water is actually wasted in the sense of exhausted, because, you know, like the earth water cycles, all these processes are actually increasing massively the temperature of the water in the earth. So let's say I was also curious to know, and there is a beautiful report called, and you can see all the references here, datareportal.com. You can see what are the most visited websites on a yearly basis. And so that there was a time back in the beginning of the internet where everybody was creating their webpage, you know, and like there was like not really maybe there were some pages that were visited more than others, but nowadays the difference is staggering. Like the first spots are always covered by the same companies, and you can see in the next slide how crazy this is, like the difference. This means that almost 19% of all the traffic on the internet goes to Google. And actually you can add this 6.44 because it's also, YouTube is also part of Alphabet, which is the matrix of all the Google services. And then you have Facebook, Instagram, WhatsApp, which is all Meta, X.com, also known as Twitter, Wikipedia, we can see already ChatGPT, even if it's February 2025, I'm sure that in 2026, this is even higher up now. So what does this actually tells us? Well, actually, these are the most used apps because you can think like, oh, okay, I'm not using a browser, so I'm okay. But also the apps are always connecting to different services. So there are many apps that are, again, connecting to YouTube, to Google, to WhatsApp, Facebook, etc. So you can see, again, the most amount of traffic goes there. So this means that there is a big part of the, let's say, the network, which is very, very underutilized. And many people obviously are using, well, Google services, Meta services, Apple services, Amazon, Microsoft. Why is that? Because most of them are free. You can use them free. They simply work. They are quite amazing, right? I mean, I also have used them myself for many years. What's the problem with that? Well, the problem is that your data, it's actually in the hands of very few people. And even if they're free, if you're giving their data to these people, you give them importance, you give them relevance, and you give them money. And there is this campaign called GAFAM.info, which already, I think it was in the year 2016 when it was launched, and it's more relevant than ever nowadays. Because as you've seen, like most of the people, when they're connecting to the internet, they're actually connecting to some of these companies. And these companies are doing a lot of data collection, actually. Like I'm sure probably most of you are not aware exactly of what are the data policies of the services that you're freely using on the internet. So what is happening actually with your data? Well, at the very least, they're doing data collection, even if it's anonymized, meaning that they do not necessarily need to get your name, but they can get your habits. They can get which places are you clicking, and correlating that with your, for example, with your age and where do you come from, and your gender and other things. They can do some big data analysis, and they use that mostly for marketing. That's how they make their money from. They are selling all of that to third parties. And for example, there are two very big, let's say, scandals or events that should actually give us a lot of warning about these practices. Back in 2016, there was a scandal of Cambridge Analytica. Some of you might remember. It was an app on Facebook which it was disguised as a game in a very let's say it seems a very not, how should I say, very dumb survey, and then people were just doing that survey, and that survey was actually collecting a lot of data, and that already served the purpose of getting a lot of data, which was used for modifying or targeting propaganda to a very specific population segment. And then I'm sure you've heard also in 2024 how Twitter, I mean, nowadays known as X, how Musk, who was clearly an obvious supporter of Trump's campaign, he was also using the algorithms within Twitter, within X, to promote certain posts above others, to give people a false sensation that some certain lines of thought were more prominent than others. So all of that leads to content selection, which is called also like a filter bubble. So you only read or hear what you actually want to read or hear, and it creates what is so-called echo chambers. There is a lot of all the power in the hands of these enterprises allows them to actually do a lot of influencing and lobbying. So they are actually paying people to influence elections and decide to pass on certain bills which are going to be more profitable for these companies. And obviously what is profitable for these companies generally goes against the general interest of people. Yanis Varoufakis, who probably some of you are very familiar with, he already said that in his book called Techno-Feudalism, that since 2008, financial crisis, our economic system has fundamentally changed. And the new land of this era is actually big data and digital platforms, and this is controlled by this tech giant. So we are entering in this era where these big companies are actually having a lot of control over us. So if I had to summarize my whole presentation in one slide, this is the one. Is surrendering to big tech our only choice? Thankfully, it is not. There are many digital alternatives to this mainstream narrative. It's just that we are not very aware of them. And big disclaimer, they're not as convenient and as comfortable as the big tech products that they're offered to you, but they work. So the first thing, which is what we're doing here right now, and I'm super happy that there are so many of us here, is increase data literacy and privacy awareness. By sharing these thoughts with you, we're already creating a bigger understanding of how this data is used and by whom. And hopefully after this presentation, maybe you'll start your own research. Second aspect is digital degrowth and mindfulness. To prioritize real world connection. The mainstream is nudging us towards digitalization. It's nudging us towards more and more data consumption. It's nudging us towards TikTok, video streaming. We don't need to. We don't need to do that. We will see it. Digital sovereignty. Sovereignty means let's take control about our digital footprint, about our data. Consumption and production of free open source tools and self-hosting, which we'll see in a second. Digital resilience, usage of so-called federated systems. I will explain all of this in a second. Free, open, and neutral network hardware, and also offline knowledge preservation, and of course, repair culture. And last but not least, digital democracy and governance. We're going to see all of those aspects right now. Just going to take a sip of water. Okay, so what about digital degrowth and mindfulness? So I was just doing a little research on the internet super fast, and I found out many, even European funded projects, which more and more have to do with digital disconnection. And people are craving that. Like we live in a highly hyper-connected society where data is shoved down our throats at every time a faster pace, and a lot of data which we actually don't need. Probably, I don't know, like what's the average age of the audience, but some of you might actually remember a time where things were a little bit simpler and we were not constantly overstimulated by data. And I mean, at the risk of maybe sounding a little bit ideal or trying to paint an ideal picture, but I think people are suffering of more anxiety and even depression. And I mean, there is not a proven direct correlation as far as I know, but I'm sure it has to do with it. Another thing that I also pointed here, it's like a narrow band connection. Like sometimes we don't need to get all the time the fastest and the greatest connection. We can think, what is it that we actually want to do before connecting? It's very easy to doom scroll and mindlessly go through videos and videos, but do we really need to? Software. Let's talk about software. Finally, I'm getting to the point of the webinar. Sorry that it took me so long. So if we're talking about free open source software, what is the alternative? Like, this is an opposition to what? And most of what we've known for a long time, it's proprietary software. Like, for example, Windows is an operating system, and you actually can execute it, you can buy it, you can use it in your computer, but you don't know what is underneath the box. You don't know exactly what kind of lines of code are there. You don't know what is happening to your data. The same goes for if you're using Google Drive. The same goes if you're using Facebook. You actually don't know what is going on. You're simply using something which people put it out there, but they don't give access to people to actually understand what's going on when people are using it. And fair enough, many of us don't have the time or the skills to actually know, even if we saw the code. But there is a lot of enthusiastic people out there who are very willing and capable of actually auditing, reading through the code, and making sure that things such as privacy is protected and they're not using any kind of like bad practices. So that's why using proprietary software is actually a black box. You cannot know whether they're following good practices or not. You don't know about your security, you don't know what happens to your data. This also means we're bound to a very specific platform. We cannot do any modifications ourselves. We are completely dependent on them to do whatever modifications they see fit. And proprietary software is usually not free. And if it is, we're probably paying with our data. This is very important. So you probably have heard that sentence. If it's free, you are the product. It also promotes mono or oligopolization, meaning that one or few solutions end up being the market leader. What's the alternative? Well, free open source software. And free, and I mean, some languages do not have that distinction, but I love this sentence, which is, please think of free as in free speech, not as in free beer. Meaning that is free because it adds to our liberty to use it in any moment, to share it. We can share it. You can study it. You can go deep into the lines of code, and you can even improve it. And again, share it and contribute. And this feels much more aligned to, I think, the values that I would say root for a regenerative culture. So yeah, we're talking about freedom, and also it results typically in potentially more secure, stable, and cost-effective software. And again, it moves from a competitive scenario to a more supportive and collaborative approach. One of the main reasons why this has not gained more traction is because this does not work so well within the capitalistic system. But thankfully, there is a lot of people who care more about these values of freedom than to promote the system, which actually ends up in offering things such as what we've seen before. Another thing that is super important, it's self-hosting, to know where your data is stored. This software typically, so free open source software, it's typically something that you can also decide where you can execute it, where you can store that data. And you can obviously, if you're savvy enough to do it yourself, you can either, like get an old computer and run some of these softwares, or you can like buy a specific, this is for example, a rack with different computers, and you can run multiple services, multiple open source software, or you can even hire companies that take care of the hardware for you, or you can even pay people that are, let's say, offering the open source service. Because again, open source means that you have access to the code, but if you want to, because you don't have the capacity, the knowledge, or the time, you can also buy it as a service. And that's completely fine within the logic of open source software. Another concept, I talked about federation before. So this is also something which is very much in hand with the values that are behind free open source software. And this has to do with, for example, let's take Google. Google Drive, it's hosted on servers which are only owned by Alphabet. Facebook is hosted on servers that are owned by Meta. And there could be another approach. And actually, there is already free open source solutions and architectures that deal with that. And they have a name, and they've called it the Fediverse. There are many tools that are typically open source software. Maybe some of you have heard about, these are some of the most known ones: Mastodon, PeerTube, or PixelFed, or Diaspora. And all of those, they allow for people to actually have different servers, like have this software running in different servers, and these servers talking to each other. So you don't need to have all your eggs in one basket. Then you can have different individuals and organizations having their own servers, and those servers talking to each other as peers. Infrastructure could also be done using those very same principles, you can also aim to have a free, open, and neutral network hardware. Like the only thing that most of us know is that, okay, if you want to have internet, you have to talk to internet service provider, and then you have to connect like either paying a fee or getting like a fiber optic to your home, etc. So there are several initiatives. One of them, very famous one in the region of Catalonia in Spain, called Giphy.net. They started to create an alternative, commonized, meaning like owned by everybody, hardware infrastructure for people to use internet with. And this was very inspiring. Nowadays, I think the project is not as vibrant and active as it could be, but just to dream that these things are possible, it also gives me hope. I'm trying to go a little bit faster because I see that I don't have so much more time. And also, I don't want to overwhelm you with a lot of details. In terms of infrastructural resilience, we also, aside from this example of Giphy.net, we also have, for example, if you follow geopolitics nowadays, you will see that there is a massive uh, shift from the whole European Union towards trying to be less dependent on, because most of those proprietary software and products and infrastructure, they're coming either from the US or from China. And this leaves the European Union in a very vulnerable place. I will not go a lot into detail about that. I just wanted to point out that the EU and generally the whole world is taking steps, if they have capacity, towards this direction. And last but not least, I want to also mention that having digital tools could also enhance the democratic experience and offering the possibility of having direct democracy. So if we think back in the days without internet and without the capacity that we have nowadays, people chose, and this is just my own interpretation, but they chose representative democracy. They elected somebody to take decisions for them. And one of the reasons for that is because it was simply not possible to gather and consult a large dispersed population very often. Nowadays, this is actually possible. And it's amazing. Like some governments have actually started using some of these tools to consult more often the population. I will just make a special mention to a decentralized autonomous organization, also known as DAO. Some of you might have heard about blockchain, and this actually goes hand in hand with cryptocurrencies. But blockchain has also enabled not only cryptocurrencies, but also the possibility of saying, what if we don't even need a government system to make decisions? And this can be achieved by using these kinds of technology. So all of those things creates a lot of potential to potentially change the digital culture we live in. And that's it from my side. I hope I was not too fast. I hope that it was inspiring enough, at least, to see that some degree of change is possible, even if the mainstream scenario is quite bleak. So yeah, I think I'll stop there. If you want to know more about Gen Europe, here you have some links. I see that we have the old one. Actually, we're not using Twitter anymore. We're not using X. We're using Mastodon, but you can find us on our website and you can see the socials there. And yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Angel, for your presentation and for introducing us this interesting topic. As you could see, guys, the subtitles were available only in the language of the speaker. So I'm sorry if you had some troubles in understanding 100% the English presentation. But you will see that this topic will be discussed in the units of Module 1. So you will have the chance to go through this topic again while attending Module 1 of the course. If you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hands or to write here in the chat. Angel, I can say that it was not a question, it was more an assessment, I mean, an analysis of what you were saying from Maria. She said, basically, for what the speaker is telling us is that everything we do has a carbon input into the internet, but not only there.
Yeah, I mean that's precisely what I was saying. Like any kind of choice, like any kind of data that you're moving around on the internet has an impact in a real impact in the world in terms of energy consumption and in terms of water consumption. So the more data you move around, the more impact you have. And I have not put any slide about that, but you can imagine that, for example, sending an email has a very low impact because we're just talking about text, which has like a very small data footprint. But if you start moving high resolution images and especially video, that has a huge impact. There are other things such as, for example, if you're using an AI model, if you're asking questions to that model that in itself doesn't have such a big impact, but actually the training of that model has a big impact. So it is good to actually start wondering all the things that we're doing on the internet, at least to know what is, and then purposely use that, like knowing what's the impact of that.
Thank you, Angel. Are there any questions, anything, guys, you would like to ask?
That's a very good remark from Giovanna. I don't know if you have some kind of policy on open source browsers, but I would really, really encourage you to actually change that policy right now.
Yes. And also Irene is saying, I would like to have suggestions about alternative to the main browser.
There are very good alternatives. I will just say very briefly. Firefox, as of now, is the best, like in terms of ethical choices. Firefox is the best alternative. You can also use anything which is Chromium based, not Chrome. Chrome is from Google, but they've created an open source project called Chromium. And there are other browsers, like for example, Brave or Vivaldi, which are open source and they are based on Chromium. So those are good alternatives.
Thank you, Angel. And there is yeah, Angela or Angela, I don't know the pronunciation, I'm very sorry. Angela has a question for us. Please, Angela.
Yes, hello, I'm Angela from Portugal. In Portugal, we say it Angela, so it's the down pronunciation. And I was really impressed with the presentation, and it's very interesting the detail and the way you connect so many issues, and it's not really a closed question that you could. It's more a comment on the connections between. I took notes on the economics, the geostrategic in terms of who's doing what physically, and also the connections with mental health. Maybe I mention mental health. Mental health has become a really hot topic because it's easy to manipulate, and the regulation and control of governments and political structures. Sorry that I don't want to I don't want to explain everything, but it's funny that I come from Portugal, which is physically in territorial terms, it's a small country, but it's the first to have the cables because we have the Açores right in the middle of the Atlantic. So the underwater cables are coming to Portugal, and there's a huge pressure to use solar panel, huge areas to build data centers. So it's really weird coming from a country like this to see what happens in terms of discourse and what happens in reality, and it's just this. I was just triggered saying we have to capture something special here and maybe add mental health. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Angela, for your question or comments. Yeah, I mean that's why I also mentioned maybe it was not the main point of my presentation, but I did mention the connection with mental health, and it is very important to consider that. And for me, it's also very important to stress that the mainstream system, capitalism, is not interested in people's mental health. So that's on us to change.
Thank you, Angela. Before moving with the questions on the chat, Federico Torelli has a question for us. Please, Federico.
If I want to change my computer, so stop use Microsoft, stop to use Chrome and everything. Are there a website where I can go and see if exists what I need? Because now I don't know if what I'm using now it exists in the open source.
Yeah, I mean, it was not part of my presentation. Again, like there are so many topics that I can talk about, but there are two websites or two companies that I want you to remember. The first one is called Framework, frame.work, and they are building modular computers, which is great. So they're focusing on repairability. Connected with that, I would always recommend to use Linux actually in any flavor as your operating system. Again, it's open source, free. And the other company that I wanted to mention is Fairphone. Fairphone is also a manufacturer of smartphones, again with the focus on sustainability and repairability. I hope I have answered your question with that.
Thank you, Angel and Federico, for the question. Okay, we have a question from Evita, which is quite generical, but hopefully, Angel, you can give us few recommendations. How can we save energy in everyday lives? And she adds, it's not easy not to text, for example.
It's true, and that's why I was saying, like, I mean, first of all, I hope that this will not, like, it don't need to, I mean, it's important, but please, like, let's not let's not live under a rock because of this. What I want to say is, like, let's be conscious. Like, for me, that's the first step. And conscious means also how much does it actually weight to send? I mean, I work online, for example, despite all of these, and for me, like I am privileged enough to actually work for a good cause. That's why for me, I justify, like, for example, having this kind of Zoom talks, which is video streaming, which is actually quite heavy. But it is all about balancing or like thinking, is there another alternative which actually takes less energy? It's just about that. And yeah, little by little, step by step, I would say, let's not throw our devices to the to the water, especially not to the water, please.
Thank you, Angel. I hope that also we could answer Tatiana's questions. That was quite similar to Evita's one. Okay, and Giorgio Rinolfi also wrote, "Thanks, Angel. I'm really in love with FOSS. My work is completely inspired and based on FOSS paradigm. We do swarm robotics with Alder Pilot, SkyBrush, and Blender, combining all of them. We do drone light show, full FOSS based. And here
Yeah,
is a link.
I'll make sure to have a look at it. Thanks for that, Giorgio. Before that, I think you skipped the one from Irene, which is alternative to Meta, especially with the proposal of chat control. So Meta is, I would say Meta is like basically WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram. So instead of Facebook, I would say Facebook is actually naturally dying of old age. I would use alternatives to, for example, Instagram. Like PixelFed is a federated alternative to that. You can also use Mastodon. For instant messaging instead of WhatsApp, you have many other things. I would recommend Signal, for example. Signal is a good one, or even Threema. Threema is not very known, but it's European based.
Thank you, Angel. Let me see if I skipped some other questions from our attendees. Okay. Okay, I think that's it. If you have any other questions, you have the last 5 minutes to ask. Okay, then I think that's it. You have my contact in case you need everything. Thank you again for joining us, and thank you, Angel, for your very, very interesting presentation and for introducing this topic to us. And I wish you a very good evening to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for attending, and thank you, Simona, for giving me the chance.
Thank you. Bye-bye.